Hey guys, this is another gameplay video that I'm gonna be making about one of my all-time favorite fighting games, Killer Instinct, released in 1994. The gameplay footage that I'm showing you guys here, it's from the arcade version. I decided to record the arcade footage because it's the superior version, and probably most of you are already familiar with the Super Nintendo version that, I already own that one and played that a million times. So I thought I make a footage from the superior arcade version of the game. So this is unedited or raw footage, gameplay footage. So bear with me because I'm gonna be a little bit rusty, and it's been a while since I played this game. So you're not gonna see me pull off some crazy combos like I used to do back in the day. But anyways, this is one of the staple fighting games of the mid 90s. At the time, it was really a revolutionary game because the graphics were beyond anything else. I believe it was the first arcade game to require a hard drive inside the cabinet, because the game required more memory, or more memory than the usual arcade game back in the day. So I thought that was pretty interesting. I decided to go with Fulgore for my character, because he was one of my favorites. He still is one of my favorite characters. And as you can see here, I'm playing against Glacius. And as you can see, the graphics in the arcade version are obviously superior to those in the Super Nintendo version. The lighting effects from when the particles flying when there's a hit. At the time it was mind blowing. Here, I'm surprised I still remember the finishing move of the No Mercy move for Fulgore. He takes out a machine gun um, on top of his head and just kills the opponent. One of the things that I loved about the arcade version is that it had those cinematic sequences before and after each battle. For example, here I'm going to play against Orchid, and it has a small cinematic sequence which at the time was like mind-blowing. The Orchid stage, if you're familiar with the Super Nintendo version, you can see that the arcade version is much improved. It zooms in and out, and it also has well, you can knock Orchid off the stage, which you were able to do that in the Super Nintendo version, but as you will see in a few seconds, I guess, the arcade version has like a more impressive uh, fall down sequence, I guess. And as you can hear in the background, the music is much better in the arcade version as well. It's pretty much one-to-one with the Killer Cut version of the soundtrack of the game. Which, by the way, this game has one of the best soundtracks and sound like effects overall, which is why I left like the first few seconds of the of this video without commentary, because I wanted you guys to hear the original introduction from the arcade version. Here we can see Orchid falling down, and she's gonna land on top of the car. But yeah, the intro is one of my favorites, and when I first saw these on the arcades, I was blown away. I mean, the speakers were set so loud in the arcade cabinets that it literally blew you away the first time you've heard this game. It was so loud, it just shadowed everything, all the arcade cabinets that were right next to it, because it had such a technologically advanced sound effects and soundtrack, and like very high quality speakers, and it really was mind-blowing back in the day. Not to mention the graphics, the new mechanics introduced in the game, like the combo system. It just made the game really popular. I here Riptor kicked my ass. Like I said, it's unedited gameplay, so bear with me for just a few seconds here. I'm gonna retry with a different character. But anyways, when this game was another funny thing also from the intro is that the game is being announced to be soonly, soon to be released on the Nintendo Ultra 64 in 1995, which I think it's pretty funny because to begin with, the Nintendo Ultra 64, got a name change. It ended up being the Nintendo 64, and it was never released in 1995. So I thought that's pretty funny. And to top that, it was not called the Nintendo Ultra 64. It was not released in 1995, and the worst offense, I guess, is that the game was never released for the Nintendo 64. Nintendo back in the day, they ran into some issues. From what I've read, Nintendo really wanted to make the Nintendo 64 right, and they also wanted the hardware parts to be cheaper, so they waited a little bit to release the Nintendo 64 in the market. Oh, as you can see here, I pulled off the Ultra combo. But anyways, yeah, Nintendo waited a little bit to release the Nintendo 64, so that didn't come out up until 1996, I believe. So this game never came out, and since Nintendo knew that the Nintendo 64 was going to be delayed a little bit, they decided to release this for the Super Nintendo. And I remember when this was first announced for the Super Nintendo, I was so excited. It was one of my most anticipated games of all time, easily, because I was such a fan of the arcade game, and it was really hard for me to play the arcade version of the game because only one arcade store that I knew had it, and it was really far away from where I lived. So I never really got to play the arcade version that often or as often as I wanted. So when they announced the Super Nintendo version, I was extremely excited, extremely pumped for the game to be released. And I remember reading the magazine articles on the GamePro and Nintendo Power and Club Nintendo magazines, and man, I kept reading the article over and over again. I kept watching, and I would just stare at the pictures over and over again. And when the game finally came out, I bought it day one. I think it was like $60 with the Super Nintendo, the black cartridge with the Killer Cuts soundtrack. It was just phenomenal, and I thought Rareware did a phenomenal job of shrinking the game down to fit into the Super Nintendo cartridge. The Super Nintendo version, if you compare it to this one, is pretty gimped. Um, but it's obvious. I mean, the Super Nintendo had a lot of hardware limitations. So I thought Rare did an amazing job of fitting the game as best as they could into the Super Nintendo cartridge. But yeah, this is definitely one of my favorite fighting games of all time. Here I switched back. I was playing with Orchid, but I got a little bit cocky and wanted to show you guys when you can also throw Cinder out of the stage, but with Orchid I couldn't do it, so he beat me, and now I'm playing with Saberwolf, which is one of my favorite characters as well in the game. Um, and it's just overall a great game. Um, the arcade version was pretty successful and popular. The Super Nintendo version was also popular. Then they went ahead and released a Game Boy version, which I never played. I always wanted to play it, but I just never did. Um, that's the finishing move for Saberwolf there. Surprisingly, I remember, but then again, it's one of the easier no mercy moves. I think it's back, medium punch right next to the opponent. It's really easy to remember. But anyways, they released a Game Boy version of Killer Instinct, and then the sequel came out. On the arcades, it was called Killer Instinct 2, and they ported that version to the Nintendo 64 as Killer Instinct Gold. And I don't know what it is about it, but the game changed a few gameplay mechanics that just it didn't make the game as memorable as the first one. Personally, I'm a huge Killer Instinct fan, but just a fan of the first game. I did play the second one. I never owned it, but I remember borrowing a copy of the game from my oh, this is the humiliation move. Check this out. Another one easy to remember since forward, 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 plus weak punch for Saberwolf. But anyways, I borrowed Killer Instinct Gold from my friend, and I did play it, and it just wasn't as fun. It just wasn't as uh, as groundbreaking as the first one, and the characters were not as likable. One of the things that I really liked about Killer Instinct when I first saw the game as a kid were the characters. I mean, they have that typical cheesy looking badass type of design that a lot of games started to use after Mortal Kombat became such a great hit. Such a different range of characters. Range and Killer Instinct is like the prime example because you have, for example, Saberwolf he's like a wolf man. Then you have Riptor, he's a dinosaur, like a velociraptor. Then you have Fulgor, he's a cyborg, a robot. And then you have regular human characters like here Chief Thunder, for example, and Jago. And then you have like weird alien type characters like Glacius, and then you have Cinder, which is like the fire type, and then Glacius is like the ice type character. And Spinal is a skeleton, so like a very broad selection of like different types of characters, animals, robots, androids, humans, whatever you can think of. So that was one of the, in my opinion, one of the most interesting parts of the game. Here I'm playing against Saberwolf, and in one of my favorite stages with one of my favorite soundtracks. If you have the Killer Cuts CD, you know what I'm talking about. The Saberwolf song is just, or soundtrack is amazing. Um, and as you can see, the animations much more fluent. Uh, Flow of the game is just way better. And like I said, this is the arcade version, so the AI gets really cheap in several parts of the game. You're gonna see that when I hit the bosses in this game. And by that I mean the game had two bosses and then the final boss. The first of the bosses is Spinal. Second of the bosses is Fulgor, and then the final boss is Idol. Um, this is TJ Combo, another one of my favorite characters in the game. I'm just being a little bit cheap there and ducking and hitting him. That's one of the cheap ways to defeat opponents in the game, but I don't think it's gonna work out for me. I think I lost this round, I believe. I'm not sure. Which is crazy. Look at my health bar. It's almost full, and then TJ Combo does two 4-hit combos, and my bar is almost gone. And then he does another super combo, and on top of that, he finishes me off with the no mercy move. So that wasn't nice. Anyways, I think let's see who did I pick after that. Fulgor, no, TJ Combo. Yep, TJ Combo versus TJ Combo. But anyways, this is perhaps my second most favorite fighting game after Street Fighter 2 Turbo, which is a big statement to make considering there's so many great fighters out there. You have all the SNK released games like King of Fighters, Fatal Fury, then you have Street Fighter, Mortal Kombat, newer games like Darkstalkers and Blast Blue. Games like that are really fun and pretty good games, but Killer Instinct just it has a soft spot in my heart. I guess it's a little bit of nostalgia, but at the same time, it was a groundbreaking game when it was released back in the day. Um, and Rareware just did an amazing job. Another interesting thing about this game is that Nintendo actually published the game, which back in the day was pretty rare. This is probably one of the first, like, at least that I know, like mature type of games that Nintendo put effort into it. The game was developed by Rare, and I think it was published. Um, I might be wrong in this one, but I think it was published by Nintendo and distributed by Midway for the arcade version of the game, and for the console version of the game, it was developed by Rare and Rareware, and published by Nintendo. And it's pretty sad, considering going back now to the present day, that Nintendo and Rare obviously split because Microsoft bought Rareware. But I read in a pretty recent article actually that one of the Rareware executives said that they would love to make Killer Instinct 3, and they actually pitched the idea to Microsoft, but Microsoft doesn't want to hear anything about it. So it's pretty sad that Microsoft made the investment of buying Rareware, and Rare is now pretty much making like Kinect games, which is, I don't have anything against it. In fact, I don't have an Xbox, and I don't have Kinect, and I haven't played any of their Kinect Rare games like Kinect Sports and all that. But from what I read from reviews and impressions, they're pretty decent games. So I don't mind Rare working on those titles, but at the same time, let them make games like they used to. And one of the Killer Instinct is one of them. Um, to be honest, I think if Killer Instinct 3 it's made, it's not gonna be popular just because it's one of those franchises that are pretty much forgotten. But you know, it will have a big enough market. I would think that for them to make a profit. So it's pretty sad that Microsoft is not interested at all in the making of a new Killer Instinct game. Um, Although I'm not sure if even if they greenlight the project, I also read some articles that there might be legal issues even if it gets the green light, because I think Nintendo also owns like some of the rights for the franchise. So I'm not too sure how that works, but the, the the truth and reality is that we won't ever probably see a Killer Instinct game ever again, which is pretty sad. And not even like a remake. Like, I would love to see this game, for example, be the arcade version being released for the Xbox arcade, or maybe since Nintendo owns the right, maybe release it for like the eShop. I think this game can easily run, or on a 3DS, for example, or it's not gonna have any problems running on the Xbox arcade, with online features and all that. But yeah, it's pretty sad that the series is gonna be pretty much dead. Um, and Rareware just stopped making quality games, and they're making like Kinect games now. It's pretty sad, but what can you do? Anyways, I think I'm gonna cut this short here. Like I said, it's one of my favorite franchises, one of my favorite fighting games of all time, and it's a little bit of a nostalgia trip for me. And I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and stay tuned for some more coming up.